Hi friends, so one of the most common questions that I get in my streams is what class should I play, because for a lot of people this is actually one of the hardest choices because there are so many classes. So I've decided to make this video to showcase all of the classes, including the ones that aren't going to be out at launch at the time of making this video for EU and NA. Now this video will be focusing more around the PvE side rather than the PvP, and I'll be making a separate video for that, so be on the lookout for that for the channel. So just before we start, I did actually hear that if you like the video and subscribe, it'll actually end up boosting your in-game DPS, so, you know, give that a try. And also, I do stream right here on the YouTube channel as well as on Twitch, and links for all that will be in the description below. And lastly, we have our community Discord with lots of helpful builds and guides, as well as an amazing community. And again, link will be down in the description below. So starting off with the warriors, we have the Berserker. The Berserker is a very bursty melee DPS class with long skill animations and high cooldown skills, but these skills hit like a truck when they connect, and the attacks also feel very weighty and impactful, meaning that when you do hit, it's not only super satisfying, but you do massive damage. Wielding a massive greatsword, the class can feel a little bit clunky when you compare it to some of the more agile classes, so do keep that in mind. It's also the least tanky of all the warrior classes, but it is a warrior class after all, so it still has a good amount of defense, so don't expect to be dying super quick or anything like a gunslinger if you get caught out. The Berserker's identity puts you into a classic Berserker Rage mode, which gives you a unique skill you can only use when raging, which does tons of damage and gives you a red rage aura around your character, as well as increasing your movement speed, damage, and attack speed, which allows you to get off your hard-hitting skills much faster and smoother, making it super fun. If you like a melee class with very hard-hitting skills and a huge greatsword, as well as an identity rage mode, then the Berserker might just be the class for you. Moving to the GunLancer, even though it's considered a DPS class by the game, the GunLancer is more of a hybrid tank support DPS class. Wielding a massive gun lance and a shield, this is the tankiest class in the game by far, with shields and damage mitigation to stay alive that literally allow you to ignore some boss mechanics and just tank them, as well as the ability to cleanse debuffs. The GunLancer thrives at staying close to a boss to deal as much damage as possible. This is also the only class in the game that has a taunt ability that allows you to uniquely interrupt some boss mechanics that otherwise cannot be stopped. The trade-off though is that the GunLancer is a slow and low mobility class that also is the only one to have a dash ability that jumps you backwards away from the mouse instead of towards it. And even though you are super tanky, you do have some access to some really good burst damage skills too, but when they're on cooldown you might not feel like you're doing too much. And the identity of the GunLancer will also allow you to self-shield, which will start to use up your gauge. If you like a forgiving class to be able to tank hits when no one else can, like the idea of having a shield and a gun lance, and don't mind the backwards spacebar jump, then Warlord just might be for you. The Paladin. Even though looks might be deceiving, the Paladin is actually one of the two main support classes of the game. With some of the most visually amazing skills, he uses a sword and a book as his weapons, and also offers two different skill types. Blue skills, which are your sword skills, and yellow skills, which are cast from the book. Even though this is a support class, it has much more of an offensive playstyle than its counterpart, the Bard. With a mix of ranged and melee skills, as well as heals, shields, and buffs, this class will have you dealing damage and saving your teammates while also looking gloriously angelic. Don't make any mistakes though, in PvE your focus is more about saving your teammates than it is about dealing damage, so keep that in mind. But with shields and buffs, this class is also quite tanky and has an identity that allows you to either buff the damage of your blue skills for yourself or buff all of your teammates around you. You do have access to some really nice AoE skills though if you choose to do some content like Chaos Dungeon solo, so you'll still be able to clear these really well. This class might be the one for you if you like supporting but with that Holy Knight feel, and like to focus on more than just how much damage you can deal, so positioning and timing of your skills is also important. And lastly, support classes are always very much in demand when it comes to raiding and endgame content. So in summary, it's a true support class, has a holy and angelic feel, it's visually amazing, It has some range skills and melee skills. It has good shields, buffs, and heals, as well as AoEs, and is always in demand for groups. Moving to the Destroyer, arguably the second tankiest class in the game, the Destroyer is a melee DPS that wields a massive gravity hammer and smashes enemies with hard-hitting skills, but they do have long animations. Now, it's important to note that this class will not be available at EU and NA at release at the time of making this video. With very low mobility, the Destroyer makes up for it with good damage and extremely strong destruction and impairment abilities. The identity of the Destroyer locks out his skills and changes him so he can only auto-attack, but this ramps up in speed and does huge damage, as well as gaining him a slow aura, and his hits also hard stagger. As well as that, the skills feel extremely weighty and impactful, and make you feel like you are leaving a big dent in your enemies, as well as having some good AoEs. The Destroyer would be perfect for someone who enjoys a class that can take a beating, is a melee DPS playstyle, and doesn't mind long skill animations and slower attacks that feel super weighty and impactful. Moving on to the fighters, we have the Striker. Now, this is currently the only male fighter class. Very similar to the Battlemaster, this is a melee DPS and is very mobile and very fast hitting class, using a mix of kicks and punches to deal damage, similar to monks from other games. The class has access to a good amount of burst damage, and when you're in combat you'll be building up your identity meter by dealing damage, and then you use that on some really hard hitting skills. With tons of mobility and low cooldowns, you'll be able to weave in and out of combat very fluidly and deal your damage when needed, making it a very engaging class. When it comes to tankiness, you're about somewhere in the middle, so not too tanky but not too squishy. And if you're someone who likes to be very mobile, enjoys low cooldowns, and the ability to be able to get in and out of combat, then this class might just be for you. In summary, it's a melee DPS, it's very mobile, attacks with punches and kicks, great burst damage. You have to build up your identity meter to use some skills, and it's about medium tankiness. Now, the Wardancer. This is a female version of the Striker that also uses punches and kicks to deal damage, but with a few small differences to their skills. Being super mobile and having short skill animations, many players say that this type of playstyle is one of the easiest in the game because you have the ability to get away from boss mechanics and AoEs much easier than like a Berserker and Destroyer that have long skill animations. They can be a bit position sensitive though, as their attacks are fast but don't have the highest range or AoEs, so when you need to be in close, you need to be in quite close. Her identity is similar to Striker's, where you charge up orbs and cast skills. However, in the late game PvE, lots of players choose to take the class engraving that nullifies your ability to gain identity orbs and grants you instead a flat 25% damage increase to all your skills, making this potentially one of the most simple classes in the game to get out lots of constant DPS instead of in bursts. The class also offers a very nice crit and attack speed buff to allies. So the class would fit perfect with someone who likes fast-paced combat with lots of hits and low cooldowns while being very mobile. Next up we have the Scrapper, and this is like a heavy-hitting, more tanky version of the Wardancer, a melee DPS and a nice middle ground between the Wardancer and the Berserker that smashes their way to victory with heavy gauntlets while also having a ton of mobility and being quite beginner-friendly. With longer animations than the Wardancer, the skills also hit harder, but also have a lot more weight and impact to them, and is perfect for someone who wants to hit hard, but also have the tools to move around quite a lot. While the attacks feel and look more impactful, they do also do a lot of destruction and impairment damage in-game to bosses, which will be needed for some of the in-game raids, where you have to, for example, stagger a boss before it wipes the raid. The class identity is unique in the fact that you don't actually have mana, but rather yellow and green skills. As you use yellow skills, it will drain your yellow meter and fill up your green meter, and allowing you to use your harder hitting green skills, which will then in turn fill up your yellow meter and allow you to use them, so you go through this cycle. The class would go perfect for someone who likes the look of the Wardancer or Striker, but wants to hit harder with a more impactful gameplay feel. Soulfist. Soulfist has a lot of ranged attacks as well as melee attacks, making it a great hybrid. The identity will have you going through power-up stages, which increase your damage and attack speed, as well as the amount of energy you get back, because this class as well doesn't use mana. With each stage you hit significantly harder, making it an extremely bursty class when you have your identity up, but when this goes on cooldown, your damage drops off significantly. The class would go perfect for someone who likes a good mix of ranged and melee abilities, as well as access to some great mobility and very high burst damage windows. It has some spectacular visuals and a nice versatile feel to it, while being decently tanky too, with some nice defensive buffs, and also has one of the, if not the hardest hitting skill in the game with its Spirit Bomb looking ultimate skill. However, because of all this, it can be quite tricky to master. So in summary, it's a melee ranged hybrid, identity makes it very bursty, no mana but has energy, versatile class, really good mobility, extremely hard hitting ultimate, and can be hard to master. The last of the fire classes, the Lance Master, is a high mobility melee DPS class that uses two different weapons, a glaive and a spear. It's important to note that this class will not be out at EU and NA at the release at the time of making this video. With a very flashy playstyle and some great AoEs, lots of flips and spins, it's an extremely pleasing class to see and play with its visuals. It's a medium tanky class that has good burst and sustained damage, and its identity allows you to weapon swap, giving her a new set of skills and also a different buff depending on what weapon you just swap to. This would also be a great class to play if you like a flashy playstyle, a weapon swap mechanic, good mobility, and lots of spins and flips. In summary, it's not out for the release of EU and NA. The melee DPS, weapon swap mechanic, flashy and visually appealing playstyle, medium tanky, great mobility, and decent bursts and sustained damage. Moving on to the gunners, we have the Deadeye. This is generally considered to be one of the hardest classes to play in the game due to the fact that you have 3 weapons to swap between with their identity. He has a set of pistols, a shotgun, and a sniper rifle, which you can freely swap between and need to do so in order to maximize your DPS. Even though it's a ranged class, you will actually spend a lot of your time up close to get off your high damage shotgun skills, as well as your pistol skills, which are short to medium range, while your sniper is very long range. This will make your playstyle very much in and out of range, while also having to manage your weapon swapping and cooldowns to remain effective. A very hard class to master, but very rewarding when you do. It's one of the most mobile classes in the game, but also one of the squishiest, and it really shines once you've built up some muscle memory for the combos. If you like guns and don't mind the difficulty, or want a challenge and tons of options for damage and mobility, then Deadeye could be the class for you. Gunslinger. A lot of the same what we just talked about for the Deadeye, but the Gunslinger is the female counterpart. With the same identity mechanics, having 3 weapons to swap between, Gunslingers have a different ultimate and a few subtle differences in their skills. To keep it simple, Deadeyes are generally considered to have better shotgun skills, while Gunslingers are considered to have better rifle skills. But let's just summarize. Hard class to master, 3 weapons to manage, long and short range skills, extremely mobile, lots of options, and very squishy, with better rifle skills than the Deadeye. Artillerist. Artillerist is the tankiest of all the gunners and wields a massive multi-gun that switches between firing bullets, rockets, and also acts as a flamethrower. With super low mobility and the ability to self-shield, the Artillerist offers huge DPS from close to medium range, as well as hard-hitting skills and some of the biggest AoEs in the game. It does have some skills though that are targeted to an area and take a few seconds to hit, like the nuke skill it has that you have to place down and wait for it to land, which does allow bosses to move out the way before it hits. The identity of the Artillerist summons a turret that you sit in with a new set of skills, but this will keep you stationary, which can sometimes be a bad thing when fighting bosses, so be aware. If you like the idea of wielding a massive gun, blasting things from range, but don't mind being not very mobile, then this class could be the one for you. It also offers a good bit of both burst and sustained damage. So in summary, it's a very immobile class, the tankiest of all the gunners with a self-shield, close to medium range, huge AoEs and high DPS, the turret mode for identity, and can miss skills if the bosses move around a lot. Sharpshooter. With a mechanical bow and a hawk companion, the Sharpshooter is the closest thing to an archer or ranger in the game. This is another class that you'll be weaving in and out of combat to maintain your DPS skills, with really good range as well as some close range skills, but your main DPS skills do come from range with your bow, with some of the charge up skills it has, which feel really impactful to use, With good mobility but also very squishy, it's not too complicated to play to get your DPS off and will be great for someone looking for that ranger feel from a game and attacking from the backlines. The class also has okay burst damage but great sustained damage and some really nice AoEs too. The identity of the Sharpshooter summons a hawk to help you out, increasing you and your party's movement speed. It also auto attacks regularly automatically and has a few unique abilities too. You'll love the Sharpshooter if you want a ranged class and love using a bow that's not overly complicated and also has some good mobility. It's also one of the only classes that has a stealth mechanic too. In summary, really long range, good mobility, very squishy, okay burst damage and high sustained damage, not too complicated, and the identity summons a hawk companion. Scouter. The Scouter is a ranged class that also has a drone which can be moved around independently with the shift key, which makes it a more complicated class to play because of micromanaging the drone's positioning. It's also important to note that this class will not be available at NA and EU launch at the time of making this video. With a mix of long and close range skills as well as the ability to stay really far back while sending your drone in, you can actually play this class really safely. A futuristic class with bombs, energy grenades, and lasers, this is a squishy class that has really high sustained damage and tons of mobility. The identity of the class will have you link up your drone in a sort of Iron Man mode where you do gain a shield and a new set of skills. Being further on into the game, you will be able to go into Iron Man mode more frequently, so you'll become less squishy because of the constant shield you'll be able to have. You'll also no longer separately control your drone, and you'll have the ability to deal tons of damage. This class might be for you if you don't mind a bit of micromanaging, as well as wanting a futuristic feel and a ranged class to play. The first of the mages, we have the Summoner, dealing elemental-based attacks from really good range, while also having the ability to summon pets, which you can partly control and micromanage. Visually very pleasing to a lot of people with elemental birds and horses as part of her skills. It's wildly appealing for that reason, and also considered by a lot to be an easier class to play to be able to get its damage off due to its simpler playstyle. The class does have access to a self-shield, but has very little in terms of mobility, so keep that in mind. Being truly ranged, you have the ability to be able to hit skills from good distance with a mix of quick and long caster skills. The Summoner will be for you if you would like to be able to do elemental based damage from great range, being able to summon pets and enjoy the aesthetics while not minding her low mobility. Her identity allows you to pick from a few unique skills that you can cast after you've built up some orbs from dealing damage and casting skills. In summary, very high DPS that is straightforward to use, visually pleasing to a lot of players, really good range, summons pets, low mobility with a self shield, and powerful identity skills. The Bard. The Bard is the second of the true support classes in the game, offering a huge amount of support to the team in terms of shields, buffs, and heals, and is a much more passive playstyle when compared to the aggressive Paladin. A good Bard will be picky with their timings to maximize their effect when fighting bosses, so having a good knowledge of the game and raids will help you out a lot. The Bard also uses a harp for their weapon and have good range, as well as the ability to go full DPS build, but you would have to spec for this specifically, and it would be a huge time and gold investment to get both a support and a DPS build geared up, so people generally just spec for support. Bards also have very low mobility, but are surprisingly tanky due to the support skills they have, and because supports are so important in Last Ark, Bards are a very wanted and needed class in group content, just like Paladins, so getting a group is always super easy. Bards would be perfect for someone who enjoys supporting and a much less aggressive approach than compared to the Paladin, but who also enjoys the classic harp sounds that she makes. The identity of the Bard will have you charge meter to be able to either buff your party or heal them. In summary, a true support class with a harp offers shields, heals, and buffs, tanky due to her skills, not very mobile, less aggressive playstyle than the Paladin, very wanted in group content, an identity that allows you to buff your party or heal them. The Arcana. Arcana is an interesting class that uses her cards as her main source of damage. A DPS caster with both close and long range skills, she can be a bit of a gambler and RNG type class that also has good mobility but is very squishy. Important to note that the class will not be available at launch for EU and NA at the time of recording this video. With her identity, the Arcana will have you fill up a meter in combat and then draw cards from a list randomly, and then you'll have to choose when to use them, and the effects will be different depending on the card. You can get things like instant mana refills, attack speed buffs, move speed buffs with the ability to be able to pass through units, or damage buffs, and this is going to be completely random depending on what cards you get. So depending on what you do draw, the potential for the class's DPS is absolutely insane, but it does come down to RNG. Because of this, it's also considered harder to play. Another mechanic she uses is her blue skills apply a stack on the target, and then her red skills consume the stack to do bonus damage. The Arcana would be perfect for someone who doesn't mind a potentially more difficult ranged caster class with a mix of long and short range skills, and doesn't mind a bit of RNG over consistency. In summary, the class will not be available at launch for EU and NA. Great mobility, a squishy class, long and short range skills, a bit of a gambler, more difficult to play effectively, but insane DPS potential. Sorceress. The Sorceress is the closest class to a traditional mage, casting hugely impactful meteors, ice and lightning skills from really good range. An important note that this class will not be available at launch for EU and NA. The identity of the Sorceress allows you to choose from either an attack speed buff, which significantly increases your cast times, or a long-range teleport to be able to get in and out of danger once you've charged up some meter. It's a very squishy class that's not very mobile without her identity and has long cast times on some skills, but outstanding visually with huge hitting skills and AoEs. The Sorceress would be great for someone who likes a more traditional mage-style class with a touch of Lost Ark to it and loves magic. In summary, not out in EU and NA launch, closest class to a traditional mage, great range, very squishy, visually amazing, long cast times on some skills. Her identity has a teleport or attack speed buff. The first of the assassins is the Deathblade. This is a melee DPS that uses 3 swords to deal damage up close and personal. With lots of fast hitting attacks and some good charge up attacks as well, the Deathblade has some great sustained damage, but only okay burst damage. With good AoEs and some heavy hitting skills, she fills the assassin stereotype well and feels very sharp and responsive, like you're doing lots of cuts and slashing your enemies to pieces. This would be a great class for someone who likes fast-paced combat and being very mobile. Not too difficult to play, I believe Blade will sit well with a lot of players, and for her identity, this will have you build up 3 orbs, which you can spend to get an attack speed, move speed, and damage buff, as well as restoring mana and also lowering the cooldown of your skills. And the more orbs you build up, the higher impact this will have, which makes the class feel super quick and assassin-like. While you have the buff, you will also have the option to end it early to deal tons of damage with a really powerful sword attack. The class is also somewhere in the middle when it comes to tankiness. The Deathblade will be perfect for someone who enjoys melee DPS with an in and out playstyle, quick attacks and high sustained damage, and an assassin feel. In summary, melee DPS class, good mobility, feels sharp and responsive, fast-paced combat, not too difficult, medium tankiness, identity with big buffs or a powerful attack. The Shadowhunter. A flashy and demonic looking class, the Shadowhunter is a hybrid of ranged and melee DPS that offers a dark and gothic feel with some weighty attacks while still being quick and agile to fit the role of an assassin. Having 2 blades on her arms, the Shadowhunter uses these as well as dark magic looking skills to offer some solid sustained DPS while being somewhere in the middle in terms of tankiness. Her identity allows her to transform into a demon form, gaining a new set of skills and elevating her DPS even higher. At endgame, there are 2 distinct builds with her class engravings, one of which focuses on doing damage in human form, while the other focuses of going into demon form as often as possible. If you like a gothic feeling character and want to transform into a literal demon, then Shadowhunter could be the class for you. In summary, melee and ranged DPS hybrid class, good mobility, medium tankiness, transform into a demon, great sustained damage, and a gothic/dark theme. The last class we have is the Reaper, and this is arguably the closest class to a rogue you'll get in the game, with access to tricky skills like a dagger throw that allows you to teleport behind enemies. The class is also extremely mobile, as well as having a stealth mechanic. Important to note that Reaper will not be available at the launch of EU and NA. Because of her mobility, the class is actually one of, if not the squishiest class in the game, with a focus on outplaying rather than tanking. As a melee DPS wielding a dagger, you'll be focusing on quick attacks to take down foes with great sustain damage. Her identity has 2 bars, a green one you fill up to be able to go invisible that also summons a clone, and then a red bar that you fill up once the green one is full to gain an additional crit, move speed and attack speed buff for when you go invisible. If you like a rogue playstyle and daggers, then this class could be the one for you. So that's my thoughts on all the classes in Lost Ark. I know not all of them are going to be out at launch, but hang in there and they will be released. And this video did take a lot of work, so I really appreciate a like and a sub. It'd really help out the channel, and let me know which one or which couple of classes you're really interested in playing down in the comments below, because I'd really love to know. If you have any more questions, remember I do stream right here on the channel as well as on Twitch, and the links for that will be in the description below. On top of that, we've got the community Discord with an amazing set of people in there and loads of useful links and guides, so feel free to join that one as well. And a huge thank you to everyone who submitted footage for this. You were asking for it on stream and you guys have been amazing, so it's great to get the community involved there. So a big special thank you, and links for anyone will be in the description below. And until the next one, guys, I hope you've at least learned something, and I also hope you have a very nice day. See you now.